I was 10 years old actually when St. John Paul II was here to celebrate Mass up at Namao, just at the Air Force Base north of the city. So I can remember, I was in grade 5, actually, grew up in Sherwood Park. And I can remember that we all had the day off from school so that all of us could go to Mass with the Holy Father with our families if we wanted. And I actually went with my next door neighbors who were not Catholic, and they knew that I wanted to become a priest even at that young age. And so we went early the night before. We met lots of people, lots of folks from all over the Archdiocese that were there camping out overnight in a farmer's field. And then the next morning as we went for Mass, we kind of walked about a kilometer or so, maybe down to the Papal Mass site. And there we celebrated the liturgy, the Eucharist, with the Holy Father. I do remember it was a very windy day, and I think that Pope John Paul II made a bit of a joke about how windy it was in Canada. And I just remember that really touched me, that Papal Mass. And even to this day, I remember it very well. I remember the music. I remember we had these little cardboard boxes that we actually would put together as a stool. And I kept that box for a long time and had the papal sort of coat of arms or motto that we used during his visit here in Edmonton. And I kept that box for as long as I could growing up, of course. And there's just a lot of fond memories of that Mass, of the liturgy, of being with the Holy Father, of really being with our community locally here in Edmonton. He actually was able to visit Elk Island Park, and that was about a day after his time here in Edmonton. And he had a few hours at the park. I think there's still a bench that is there with his name on the bench where he sat and prayed the rosary. And there's a famous picture of him walking through the park that has been seen around the world, actually. And I know that, I think hopefully for the Holy Father, that was really a time of personal time, really just to sort of get away from everything that was going on, sort of the official engagements, but just time to be in prayer with the Lord. So the peace dove that we have here in the River Valley, that was actually part of the sanctuary of John Paul II's visit in 1984. And so that peace dove is certainly something that we look at as a sign of peace, certainly in our present time, but also very instrumental in the Pope's visit here in 1984. The cathedra that Archbishop MacNeil used during his time as Archbishop of Edmonton was also used by St. Pope John Paul II during his visit here in 1984. The cathedra is actually now housed in the Archbishop's sacristy, just off the main sacristy here at St. Joseph's Basilica. And often I think of the pictures that are outside my office here of John Paul II, and we have pictures of him walking up the stairs and of celebrating that ecumenical prayer service here that evening. When I'm in the cathedral and I'm praying, I think, wow, there was a saint who was here, John Paul II. And for me, that still strikes me in a very real way. To think that he was here. I know he visited Edmonton as a cardinal, but certainly as our Holy Father, and to have him be here in our cathedral, it's an honor, really. I must admit, being a 10-year-old and ever thinking that I would serve as rector here at St. Joseph's Basilica, I don't know if I ever could have imagined that.
Remember, it was only a year or so after the assassination attempt. So people prayed for his recovery through that time. They got used to praying for him. And they were happy when he recovered. They were happy that he was coming here, but they wanted to continue to pray for him, that nothing like this would happen to him here. And because he was willing to come to visit us, they felt an obligation to pray for him, be close to him, because now, he's reaching out to us, and we have a chance to see him in the flesh, and many people will have a chance to be close to him. We began to see this is a spiritual journey. It's just not like tourists that are traveling. He's coming to teach us, but He's coming to demonstrate in his own life, his own faith, and his love for people. And he showed that in many ways. Like, he was willing that morning to talk to all those young people. When we went out to the site for the Mass, one of the first group of people we introduced him to were people who had, my old language, various kinds of handicaps. Blind people, deaf people, people with crutches, people with all kinds of problems. And he went in among them to talk to them, meet, and they could see, he was at home with them. So there was many ways in which he kind of demonstrated, again, being at home, being comfortable with his people. They're part of his people. So they see a pope now as not somebody way, way off in Rome. Pope was somebody we saw, we were next to. So in that day, he visited 3 dioceses in Winnipeg, St. Boniface, and the Ukrainian Catholic diocese. A long day. Late that afternoon, he left Winnipeg to come to Edmonton. So it was early evening, and we had arranged that rather than coming to the international airport, they would come to Namao. There was a wonderful air base out there, and there's a landing that was long enough for some of the satellite people to land. So he landed there, he was very happy. And one of the interesting things about coming there was a big lineup of media people on the side of the tarmac. And I said, Holy Father, would you like to meet some of the media people? He said, yes. Went over and shook hands with everybody who was lined up there. First one that had ever had an opportunity to meet in the flesh, We walked a good distance to get to the end of the tarmac. And these people never expected him to come there. It wasn't on any agenda. And they realized that. And I remember when he reached out to one young woman to shake her hand, and she was so rattled, she had a microphone in her hand, and she put the microphone in his hand. But, people were so happy and amazed and awestruck, that he would do that. And by the way, he stayed at a convent, the Grey Nuns Center at the West End. So not in a hotel or not in a great palace, but in a convent. And it was large enough to accommodate most of the entourage. Before he went to bed, I said, you got homework to do, Your Holiness. Homework, he said. I said, yes, the Edmonton Journal put a contest on asking young people if they would enter a contest and answer this question. What would you say to the Pope if you had a chance to see him in 100 words? And I said, there's going to be 10 of them on the way out of the convent tomorrow morning, and they'll say hello to you. But I said, here's the Edmonton Journal, and here's what they said. I didn't say, now you've got to read this, but the second kid he saw, he said, you're from Chile, yes, and your uncle is in prison, yes. And the young fellow's parents were behind him, and they started to cry because it's obvious, that he had read his article. But he did that all along. And near the end, he whispered to me, he said, is that young lady the one who asked, why can't women be priests? I said, yes. I didn't know what he'd do. He went over and he was so gracious with her, asked her name and what she was doing. Never mentioned that question at all, but spent more time with her than with anybody else. Put him on the helicopter and took him out to Namao again. And that's where we had the site for the Mass. The effect on people, it's hard to measure that, honestly. But I think for all those I don't know how many people are out there, 100,000 and beyond. You know, for them, the Pope can't be any longer just a distant person, you know. And they see he cares. And the effect on a lot of people who weren't Catholic, a lot of my friends in the media who were there, you know, they were very, very, very impressed. I'm not too sure it changed me, but I think it did. I guess, and I think it's the effect having a lot of people. For a lot of people, they still remember that experience as one of the most powerful experiences of their lives, because they saw the Pope in flesh. They saw him pray. They saw him, as I said, with a lot of people. But of course, I was very close to him. And when he came that evening, we took him to the Grey Nun Center, and we took him to the chapel, and he wanted to say a few prayers before the Blessed Sacrament, and I knelt down with him. What amazed me was that in a split second, he just seemed to be in a completely other world. You know, he had that ability to get in touch with God, you know, in prayer immediately. You know, sometimes people have to take a few minutes to get adjusted to where he is and whatever. No, that was instant. I saw that in many cases. And I began to notice that he could do that with people. He seems to be able to focus so completely and deeply to each individual that in a way it's almost as if he's able to have the same attitude to individuals as he has with God. You know, he's just totally present. And there was one of your questions there, maybe you're going to come to it. You mentioned the word person. And that was a word used very, very often by the Pope. He always talked about the person, and in the context of the individual rights of every person, the individual responsibility, the individual worth of every person. He didn't often use the word human being. He's a person. And so in so many ways, his whole life was kind of a prayer. You know, he could be relaxed. And so, you know, we became good friends. I really began to see him, I suppose every bishop feels the same way, but he was certainly my mentor and someone that I would try to emulate. You know, I was here a day and a half. I had meals with him 5 times. Most of those times it was just the Vice President, Archbishop Legary, and myself. So, for example, we had breakfast the morning before going out for the Mass. And in the middle of breakfast, I noticed we're eating cornflakes. And I said, Holy Father, do you like cornflakes? And he said, well, the sister put it here for us to eat, so we eat it. Simple enough. And it's wonderful. You know, it was early in the morning. He probably wasn't all that anxious to start getting the conversation. So I was trying to find any which way to get him conversing with us. He wasn't biting at all. And I said, you know, oftentimes I think in your writings and in your talks, you talk about that our faith should be enculturated, should be part of our people, who we are. But I said, who are we as Canadians? We've got so many cultures here. So in culture, what? In what culture? Oh, I looked up, he said, he said, you're just creating your own culture here. You're just beginning. Europe has done that over centuries. You're just beginning here. So then he was alive for all kinds of discussion. He's blessed now, and I was just praying to him when I was waiting for you. And so, before too long, he's going to be canonized. And again, you know, as I say, he was among us. And he could make things so simple. I don't know if you ever read, one of his encyclicals was at the beginning of the new millennium. And in the middle of it, he talked about holiness. He said, we're all called to holiness. So when the person comes for baptism, we could ask, do you want to be holy? Instead of, do you want to be baptized? And then he said, the description of holiness is the high standard of ordinary Christian living. Nobody has ever said that before or since. But that brings it down to the ordinary housewife. What's holiness? The high standard of ordinary Christian living. Sounds so easy. And he could probably say, you know, if you still thought you were listening, that means following God's will. Same thing. So for him, holiness was simply being ourselves, being who God wants us to be. Because the security people said it was too windy out in the mountains for the helicopter to go up there. And they wouldn't want to take a chance with that. And you know, we couldn't force that. The security were in charge. That was it. And that's why we had to get the second plan. We had lunch at Providence House, and I knew that he was not happy there, and he wasn't going to be happy to go out and walk there with all the military around, the soldiers around. So I began to start talking about Elk Island Park. Why, I don't know, inspired. So I was rattling on, nobody was interested. Finally, I noticed that his friend, a Polish doctor, that he took with him. And the Polish doctor said, oh, you realize what I was trying to do. He said, Holy Father, I think the Archbishop is talking about a place that's similar to where we used to walk. All right, we go. So I said, no. I called over the head of security, McIntyre. I said, the Holy Father and I are going to Elk Island Park. No, you can't, he says. No way. Why not? It hasn't been secured. I said, we're the only ones that know. I don't think even God knows that we're going. Okay. So I said to the Holy Father, when's a convenient time? So he named it sometime 2:30. So we got in a nice limousine, just the Holy Father, the secretary, who's now Cardinal Juwitz, and myself, and a couple of motorcycle guys. We went out to Elk Island Park, and I'd been there many, many times. I knew it very well. So I went to a parking spot. My gosh, when we got there, it was filled with policemen. And I'm thinking to myself, they're probably all wonderful Polish Catholics, chance now to meet the Pope. And so I said, no, we can get out here. Pope said, with all the policemen around, why? I called the inspector over. Come on, guys, just go down the road a little bit. So give the Holy Father a little bit of space. Okay. what about security? When the guy said, I said, how about one of the Swiss Guard and one of the Mounties? Okay, Swiss Guard can go ahead and the Mountie stay behind. So we went out in the path, and the Holy Father looked around, he couldn't see any security, and the Swiss Guard was way up ahead. So I felt comfortable, and then I said, his Polish doctor was there, and you fellows probably want to converse in your own language, and I'll go up ahead, and I'll go up with the Swiss Guard. So I caught up to him, and I said, by the way, where are we going? I don't know, he said. He said, don't you know? Yeah, I know, yeah, sure, but you're leading, you're ahead here. And I said, look at all the tracks here. You know who made those tracks? No. I said, they were made by buffalo, bison. He said, they're not here, are they? Well, look, there's their tracks. Where are they? They must up ahead somewhere. The guys get whiter and whiter. I said, what would you do if they come around the corner here? Oh, well, so I said, well, they're probably not, and whatever. But then it's funny, a little while afterwards, one of the photographers from Observatorio Romano came over and said, there's a nice lake over there. Can you get the Holy Father to come over by the lake and we get some photographs? So I said to the Pope, here's what they want. And he looked at me with a smile. He said, do we always have to do what the photographers want us to do? No way. I said, bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye. Head out. But we had that kind of wonderful conversation. When we come back from the walk, we walked quite a piece, and he said, you know, is there a place here where I could sit down? And I said, yeah, come here. There's right over here by the lake. There's a nice bench. Came over, a nice big park bench. Sat down, reached in his pocket, and he took out his breviary. A breviary is a pretty thick book, you know. And I said to myself, what bishop or what priest going on a hike in Elk Island Park would take his breviary with him? There the Pope sat down, and I walked away somewhere, took his breviary. After a while, when I saw he was finished, I went over, and then he said, is there another little place, quiet place where we could walk? And I said, sure, come. So I took him down the road, and I noticed, now he's in his white soutane. He takes out his rosary beads. So I said, okay, you pray here, and I'll go up ahead and we'll pray. And the photographer came and took that, and you've seen that photograph. It's all over the world, but it's not given credit to Elk Island Park at all. It's just the Pope walking in the woods, saying the rosary beads.
Imposible para ti, tú te hiciste hombre, porque nada es imposible para ti. Tú venciste a la muerte, porque nada es imposible para ti. Tú venciste a la muerte, porque nada es imposible para ti. Nada es imposible para ti. Nada es imposible para ti. Tú estás en la iglesia, porque nada es imposible para ti. Tú estás en la iglesia, porque nada es imposible para ti. Tú estás entre nosotros, porque nada es imposible para ti. Tú estás entre nosotros, porque nada es imposible para ti. Nada es imposible para ti. nada es imposible para ti. ¿Por qué tengo miedo? Si nada es imposible para ti, ¿por qué tengo miedo? Si nada es imposible para ti, nada es imposible para ti, nada es imposible para ti.